Hello, welcome to Mental Health, Wellness, and Recovery. My name is Richard Weingarten. I'll be your host for tonight's show on the LEAP program in New Haven, whose motto is Creating a New Haven for Our Children. My guest for tonight's show is Henry Fernandez, the director of LEAP. LEAP stands for Leadership, Education, Athletics, and Partnership. Before we hear from Henry, I'd like to tell you a little about LEAP and how it serves the New Haven community. Let's begin by hearing from a LEAP student coordinator, China Blair. Victor, please show the video.
At the heart of what we do at LEAP are our counselors. And so we wanted you to hear from one wonderful counselor this evening, China Blair. China's a student at the University of New Haven and a LEAP counselor. So turning it over to China.
Thank you, Henry. So again, I'm China Blair, and I go to the University of New Haven, and I'm a psychology student, and I'm a senior counselor for the 11 and 12-year-olds. So a little bit about why I wanted to go into child psychology was my little brother. He really struggled growing up with attention and learning and his behaviors, and I was convinced that he had ADHD because of the courses I was taking within my psychology department. It took me so long to convince my family that he had ADHD, but after 2 long years, he got diagnosed and he's doing much better. This is something that I want to do for the rest of my life, and LEAP puts me on that path to do so. I'm surrounded around so many different children with so many different personalities and behaviors and dreams, and we really get to expand on that during LEAP. And one thing, one child in particular who really had an impact on me, his name is Malachi, Malachi Grant. And he has cerebral palsy and he has learning deficiencies. But in a world where Malachi would be stigmatized against, he thrives at LEAP and he succeeds at LEAP. And we get to expand on his dreams and his interests with the different curriculums that we get to choose for our children. And that's amazing. Malachi actually told me that he wants to become a leader in training. And right before my eyes, I can see the roots that LEAP has embedded in him. He's growing roots within LEAP and roots within the community. And he's becoming way more successful with the curriculum that we have in place for him. And that's amazing to see that people grow up in LEAP and they become so successful. And there has been many alum at my time at LEAP who have come back and talked about how successful LEAP has been in their life and how they can go after their dreams and they apply all the things that they learn within LEAP to their everyday life. And I have not seen that in many places that I have worked. These children have had such an impact on me as much as I have on them. And to see so many children come back to LEAP and talk about how they were leapers and then they were leaders in training and junior counselors and they're so successful within the community now. I think that is so, so amazing. And because of you all, that is possible for us. We're able to grow a community within LEAP and have kids proud of their community and proud of everything that they learn at LEAP. So because of you, you make this all possible. So I just wanted to personally say thank you.
What a great testimonial. You know, children from white middle class and upper middle class families are given opportunities that children from Black, Latino, and immigrant families often don't have access to. Opportunities such as after-school tutoring, sports, dance classes, cooking, computer coding, arts activities aren't usually available to children of color and immigrant children. Their parents are often working 2 and 3 jobs and can't drive them to after-school activities. LEAP, with its after-school programs in the schools, provides these activities in 8 low-income neighborhoods in New Haven. The LEAP after-school programs offer tutoring and also enrichment activities. LEAP students keep up with their schoolwork under supervision, but also make new friends. They discover new interests. They learn things about themselves, what they like, what they don't like, what they're good at, what they're not so good at. The tutors are often people who look like them and many tutors have gone through the LEAP program themselves. These tutors take a personal interest in the students they tutor and become excellent role models. Like families that are there for their children, LEAP counselors, tutors, and staff are there for the children taking part in the after-school and summer LEAP programs. When students reach the age of 13, they can become eligible for leadership training. When they complete this training, they become junior and senior counselors for younger children, and they are paid for their work. For many, this is their first real job. LEAP also offers an exciting summer program in 5 locations with wide assortment of enrichment activities such as African dance, music, jazz, the martial art dance capoeira, painting, chess, basketball, swimming, and more. For the summer program, LEAP develops community partnerships with people from the New Haven community who offer a wide assortment of classes and activities. LEAP offers the summer participants trips to the Peabody Museum and the Yale Art Gallery and the theater classes with Elm Shakespeare New Haven. LEAP also manages the rebuilt Q House and manages it, which we'll talk about later. So now it's my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome Henry Fernandez, Executive Director of LEAP, for tonight's program. Henry, welcome, and can you tell our viewers what LEAP's mission is and what it's offering New Haven kids at this time?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Richard. Really excited to be here and chat with you this evening. Our mission is really to train college and high school students to provide high quality after school programs, summer programs for younger children. And we've really had like everyone, a very complicated last couple of years, but it's been a period of growth for us. You did a great job explaining a lot of what we've got going on, but I'm looking forward to talking more about it this evening.
Could you tell us a little about the scope of the LEAP program? How many students do you deal with each year, and what's your staff like, and where do you get funding for all these programs?
Absolutely. So we work with about 800 young people. That's the young children, 7 to 12-year-olds who are in our after-school program and summer camp. As you mentioned, we have a Leaders in Training program for 13 to 15-year-olds, and many of them will go through that program and then become junior counselors working for us. We have junior counselors who are high school students, senior counselors who are college students, and quite a few kind of start as young people and then move right on up through those different roles. And some will even then go on to be staff members for us. To do all this, it's expensive. We're the largest youth agency in New Haven. We also employ the largest number of young people in the city. And so we spend a good amount of time raising money, a lot from individuals. We have a few thousand individual donors to us. And sometimes those are people who might give $5 a month, and some people are able to give more and do give more.
I noted in your recent receptions where you had 20 dinners going on around New Haven, Rachel Brown, your development director, told me that you raised over $300,000 that night.
That's true. We raised about $340,000.
That's pretty cool.
You know, and that was all people. That was in addition to people buying tickets. A wonderful set of corporate sponsors.
Nice.
Companies in the greater New Haven area have been very supportive of LEAP for decades now. We're almost 30 years old, and I guess we'll be 30 next year, this year, something like that. This summer will be 30 years. So corporate community has been very, very supportive. Individual donors, as I mentioned. We get support from the city of New Haven as well, and from the state of Connecticut. So it takes, and then a number of national and local foundations support LEAP as well.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Tell me, if a parent is interested in enrolling their kids in a LEAP program, how do they do that?
Well, first they got to be New Haven based. So we serve kids in New Haven. We particularly, for younger kids, target low-income neighborhoods in New Haven. But it's pretty easy. The easiest way to do it would be just to go to our website at leapforkids.org, and right
be
there.
On the screen, I think. No, not quite.
Not quite yet,
No,
but
it will be though.
leapforkids.org, and that's leapforkids.org. And there they can see the programs and they can sign up for the programs. And if they want to donate, folks want to donate, they can donate there as well.
Great. Now you also manage the Q House. It's recently rebuilt. I saw pictures of it. Looks terrific.
Oh, it's beautiful.
You know, it really is, and it serves both LEAP students and also the community, doesn't it?
That's right. In fact, so the Q House is a historic center in the African American community in New Haven, and it fell on hard times economically, and so closed. And then a group of dedicated community members in the Dixwell and New Hallville community worked to get funding to have a new Q house built. And then they partnered with the City of New Haven to choose us to choose LEAP to be the manager there. And the Q House certainly has an after-school program with LEAP, but we also have programs for adults. We have a cooking class that's starting next week, and a beautiful commercial kitchen that's there. The Q House also has art spaces, so it has a dance studio, and we have capoeira classes.
I used to live in Brazil, so I know capoeira.
Yeah,
It's a martial art dance that's terrific. You have to be acrobatic to do it, though.
Or to do a lot of the moves. I think maybe it's a little past me. Yoga classes, and all of these are provided by community members.
Is
We
there a
have painting
cost involved?
classes.
Do people have to pay for the classes?
Yeah, so right now our programming is for all of LEAP's programming for little kids is free. Our programming at the Q House right now is free. We may eventually start to charge a little bit. We charge a little bit, for instance, for our swim classes, but right now everything is free as we're trying to figure out all the details of getting reopened due to COVID, and also just we really want the community to experience the Q House, and so we figure at least through this summer we'll keep all of the Q House programming free.
You know, your website is very interesting. I learned a lot just by looking on your website. One thing I learned was that black students, black kids, have a 5 times greater chance of drowning
That's right.
than white kids. How do you deal with that? I know your office on Jefferson Street has a big pool, I've heard.
That's right, yeah. So we teach a lot of kids to swim. It's one of the things that was really bad about COVID. There were many things that were bad, but we had to reduce the number of kids that we were teaching to swim. But usually we teach about 300 kids to swim a year.
Wow.
And this issue of, for historic reasons, public pools in many places, even in Connecticut, were not accessible to black children. And so what that meant was that that's how most people would learn to swim, right? You go to the public pool and you learn to swim.
I learned at the YMCA.
That's exactly right. And so historically, there's been discrimination, and so communities, African Americans in particular, didn't learn to swim. And what we know from our own work is once you learn to swim, you'll make sure your kids learn to swim.
Right.
And so it's one of those things that once you can kind of get folks to learn to swim, you've kind of taken care of generations in the future. Whereas in the same way, because of that discrimination historically and access to pools not being there, that meant that process was blocked. And so we're very committed to not only teaching kids to swim, but also teaching kids to be swim instructors, teenagers to be swim instructors and lifeguards, so that we're building a community of swimmers.
Right.
In New
I've heard
Haven.
also that you offer swim classes to the parents of the children.
We do. We took a pause on that during COVID, but we're now looking at starting that back up as well. We've had a lot of demand for water aerobics among parents and seniors especially, because of it not having too much impact on your joints.
Interesting. You know, one of the things I gleaned from my conversation with Rachel Brown, your development director, was that your high school, your success rate for high school students going to college, either 2-year colleges or 4-year colleges or into the military, is like 100%.
That's right.
How do you do that? There must be a lot of preparation for kids to think about higher education, then how to go about applying and everything else.
Absolutely. Well, I think there's a few pieces to that. One is because we're their employer, we employ so many high school students, we're able to kind of have a little more leverage on them than maybe some others might have. And so we do require that if kids are struggling in school, if they want to keep working for us, then they need to take. We'll give them tutoring to support them to make sure that works out. And then we help them with college essays and SAT prep. We also run a college tour every year. So
that's another amazing part of your program, because according to Rachel, you go down south to North Carolina, South Carolina, you see black schools, you see public schools that are large. I mean, that's an amazing thing.
That's right. We try to show kids a mix of schools. They may not go to any one of those schools, but we want them to understand the different kinds of schools there are, these big public universities, maybe a smaller school that's in a suburban traditional campus setting, historically black colleges. We want kids to see these things, see these different places, these different institutions of higher education, and say, oh, that seems like a good fit for me. Then they might actually wind up going to school, not in North Carolina or Virginia or wherever we take them. They might make that same decision in Philadelphia, right? Or they might wind up in Delaware or in Connecticut. And for many of our
China Blair was
China Blair,
here
yeah.
in New Haven, University of New Haven.
That's right.
Do you also help them get scholarships and funding for their higher education?
We do have a few scholarships that we give out every year to some of our graduates, and we do we do some classes around applying for financial aid and filling out the FAFSA form, which is kind of what you have to do. Also, many of our kids are eligible for something called New Haven Promise, which is a program funded by Yale and kind of coordinated by Yale and the city of New Haven and the New Haven Community Foundation, Greater New Haven Community Foundation, which says that or funds young people who maintain, I think, about a 3.0 GPA or higher. If they can get accepted to one of our state colleges, it'll pay their tuition. And so we've seen a lot of our young people then wind up at UConn, Southern, and the schools are much more affordable because of New Haven Promise for them. So all those things combine to make it possible for us to get so many of our kids into college and
now,
hopefully
do you also counsel the children that, or the young adults that are in college?
We do. We try to make sure that they're successful. We provide lots of professional development for them, but also we give them guidance around things like student loan debt and issues with regard to being successful, how to manage your time, all of these things. And obviously we're also their employer, and so that helps them pay the bills, pay for food and things like that. And we know that for a lot of kids, particularly kids of color who are kids, I guess, college students, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, we know that a big part of the reasons that kids don't succeed in school is actually financial, even more so often than academic. And so by their having this additional income, because usually financial aid won't cover all of your costs, maybe won't cover your books or cover your food, this helps allow them to cover those costs as well.
Interesting. I was going to say something about COVID, because we've all come through a tough 2 years with COVID. Could you kind of talk a bit about the impact of COVID on the LEAP programs?
Absolutely. So we had to first, when everything shut down, we had to figure out how we were going to stay open, and so we went to an online program. And from that, we realized that a whole lot of our kids didn't have access to laptops at home. So we built out a program and got a bunch of donors together, including some local college students who raised money, and we were able to distribute hundreds of laptops to kids and families so that they could be part of LEAP, but also so they could do their schoolwork. And then eventually, the New Haven Public Schools, in fact, the state government, made sure that every child in the state had a laptop. And what's powerful about that is what we should have known all along was that these kids didn't have access to technology, and we were really requiring in school that they be using it, right? That they were supposed to come home and do research or write an essay, and it turned out that a majority of New Haven kids didn't actually have access to that kind of technology at home, or if they did, they were sharing it among 3 kids, and all 3 kids might have had a term paper that night. So we did a lot of work there. We also started a program to help families that needed support with rent or that needed support with food. We've given out over $300,000 in support for rent and for food to families in our communities and who have kids in LEAP.
What were some of the mental health implications of having to study at home, away from your friends, via a computer or online learning? That was very difficult for kids. It kind of completely upended their lives, didn't it? And there were mental health results or implications to all that kind of disorganization and everything else that came with it.
That's really true, Richard. I mean, I think the thing I would say is that across all of the age groups that we work with, whether those are 7-year-olds or 21-year-olds, that and everything in between, that there were real mental health implications for COVID. If you think about it, each of these kind of blocks of ages, kids are going through important social development, socialization moments, and as well as academic moments. Think about how hard it must be to teach a kid to read via Zoom, right?
Really?
And or to manipulate blocks, to learn math concepts. But there are also social development and socialization issues there, where kids are learning to be in a room with 20 other children at 7 years old, and they're learning how to sit and listen to a teacher, and
Also, how to socialize with other students.
and most importantly, how they're interacting with the other young people their age, and building how to build friendships, and how to kind of try something and have it not work, and then say, oh, okay, well, tomorrow I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk to this other child differently, or I'm going to go talk to these kids. But then you take that, and we also have socialization issues as children are maybe moving from 7th and 8th grade
Now, talk
into high
about
school.
that, really, because that's a crucial age group,
That's
isn't
right.
it? Because that's the transition to adolescence and high school, and it's a difficult period for lots of kids.
It's really where kids are developing important aspects of their personality. They're starting to deal with issues of sexuality very differently. Their identity is being formed in new ways, and they're going through puberty. All of these things are hitting, and again, the ability to kind of try things out, to develop different kinds of friendships. This was all taken back from kids, and so we just did a training on Friday to help our college and high school student staff be able to understand how some of the young people are actually trying to deal with these stresses, their anxieties, the social pressures that they're feeling that are exacerbated by COVID, and some kids acting out in negative ways, some kids self-medicating using drugs, marijuana, alcohol.
How do you bring up these things? Because children don't want to talk about these very readily, do they? I mean, do you do it in group? Do you do it individually? I know you hired a mental health social worker.
That's right.
To work with some of your kids that probably are more problematic, right? But how do you approach this? Because mental health is a kind of it's a taboo for lots of people. You don't like to talk about it because you don't like to admit that I have depression, or that I'm lonely, or that I was very anxious yesterday and I couldn't do my work. I mean, it's a tough thing to talk about.
It is, but I think one of the interesting things about COVID is that it really has kind of opened the door for different kinds of conversations, because
true, yeah.
everybody is impacted. I remember talking to a clinical social worker about just this, and she said, well, this is different because for years in her work, she would be talking to young people about issues that they were facing. But when it came to COVID, she was facing it at the same time. She was facing some of the same stresses that they were. And I think all of us are facing those stresses. We all know that we would rather be out in public and socializing. We'd rather go to a play. We'd rather watch a child or grandchild at an athletic event. And that was taken away from us. So we all feel that. And we've been more willing, I think, to be open about that. I also think it's a generational issue. I think that younger people are more willing to talk about these things than
I've
maybe
heard that,
people
yeah.
in our generation.
Yeah.
And I think that that's valuable. You've seen that as well with some Olympians who have stood up, and
seen that, yeah.
professional athletes
Yeah.
that have stood up, and
It took a lot of
Naomi
courage for
Osaka.
them to do that,
Yes.
but they made their point, didn't
They
they?
made their point, and it opened the door for more space. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It doesn't mean that it's easy for every family or that it's easy for every child. And certainly some children were already facing trauma, and then they had COVID laid on top of it. And so they may be willing to talk about COVID, but not about that other underlying trauma. So there's complexity to that. And so one of the things that we try to do is to talk about how you can, what are some of the signals that you may want to look for, some of the ways to start conversations, but then also here are some experts that you can pull in that can help out. And
Let me ask you something, because with the kids, you really should talk to their parents too, because their parents are very much worried, or they're concerned about their kids, and the parents are not that well equipped to talk about these issues either. So how do you approach the parents, and how do you help them deal with these issues?
Yeah, I mean, parents are still almost always the best advocate for their child, and so pulling parents in so that they can be part of the solution is very important. And often the parent is just like, oh, I've been seeing this, and I'm so glad that you're reaching out, because I could use another hand. Because what I said before about how everyone is going through COVID, how everybody went through, that was true for parents too, who now had to figure out, for instance, their child was no longer at school, so the child had to be at home, and the parents got to go to work, and they've got to figure all of this out. And the way that school instruction was working over the internet was that it's what we would call synchronous and asynchronous learning. It's but in a portion of that learning, it's not the teacher teaching. It's the teacher telling the parent, would you please work with the blocks that we sent home?
Oh, I see.
Right?
Uh-huh.
And
So enlisting the parents to be involved too.
exactly. And so parents became very, very important in terms of the ability to get
Right.
some school work done, especially for younger children.
Let me change the subject slightly.
Yeah.
Let's look at graduates of LEAP. What are some of your graduates doing after they go through the LEAP program?
Well, we have just, now I guess, probably 20,000 folks who've been through LEAP. And so they're all over New Haven and Greater New Haven and all over the country. So we have lots of school teachers because of all of the work that we've done developing young people. Young people who want to be school teachers often come to us, but even if they didn't want to be school teachers, often when they leave us, they go off to be school teachers. We have school principals. We have an assistant superintendent in Waterbury.
Nice.
We have a superintendent of schools in Minnesota. And then we have people who've achieved great things. We have Robert Bonta is the Attorney General of California,
cool.
and the mayor of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Would you please give our viewers like a takeaway from the program about LEAP, or about the opportunities for young people that they need? What do you say to the people out there viewing us?
Well, certainly we'd love everyone to learn more about LEAP, but I would say that this has been a tough couple of years for kids. It's been tough for all of us, and so sometimes we don't think, oh, let me spend some extra time with kids. But I think all of us as adults should feel comfortable having direct conversations with children about their mental health. And if we don't like to use terms like mental health, you can say, how are you feeling? I know it's been a stressful period. Get young people talking. And I think that is really important. If there's one takeaway, I'd say it's that, and spend time with them and let them tell you what they're feeling.
Henry, it's been a pleasure having you on the
I've
show
loved
tonight.
talking to you, Richard. Thank
Thanks
you.
very much for coming on the show tonight. I hope the viewers have enjoyed the show as much as I have. It's been very informative, also inspiring too. The work that LEAP is doing is just fantastic. I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk about it tonight.
No, me too. Thank you.
Thank you.